Alright, we're in the upstairs bathroom at 19 Pennsylvania. Hopefully this is actually the most straightforward way to get into this sewer. Yep, even the drop is a sweep, which is unusual. A lot of times it's a T, and you gotta fight it to get down. This would sweep nicely. So that's actually gonna probably help us out here and make this exactly what we're hoping for. So this is the bottom there. And that was actually pretty darn easy. It's staying cast iron, so what I suspected, because the property line is essentially the edge of the house, is that it's dropping in that crawl space and staying inside the foundation wall. And we know that's probably true because this is all cast iron, and that's what's underneath the structure. And this looks fine. It's 4-inch. It's a little rough looking. It's always a little rough looking. I mean, that's scale and rust and normal. Absolutely normal. Little line tying in there, probably the kitchen branch coming across.
Is this the original piping?
That is.
What kind of material do they use these
cast
days?
iron. Oh, these days would be ABS or PVC, and then PVC.
Okay.
Higher end is all PVC. Normal houses is ABS and PVC.
Okay.
So we're getting near the back of the house. Now, we're going to see stuff like this. I'm not thrilled with this one because of the piece that's isolated, but if you look at that, this is our joint between cast iron and clay. You see that bright white line arcing down? That's a crack. And then it's cracked across and up across on the right too. Don't like to see it isolating pieces like that. They haven't moved much at all. They're still very much lined up where they're supposed to be. And they've probably been cracked for a very long time. Don't like to see pieces isolated. The other drawback of this is where it's at, which would be probably directly underneath that porch in the corner there, because this was pretty straightforward, so I bet it's running right along. So as far as repairs go, this is not going to be something that affects your function in the near future. It's going to be like this for quite some time, but it's really blatantly obvious, really easy to see. So if it's a flaw you decide to accept because you don't think it's going to cause you problems, and I don't think it's going to, doesn't mean when you go to sell it, they're not going to see that, and whoever does it for them goes, oh, this is horrible. Right. So it's like everything else in an old house. The flaws you accept are now your flaws. And this one, if it was just the white crack swirling down, I wouldn't care one bit. I don't like the fact that those two pieces, there's actually 3 pieces isolated there. 1, 2, and then this piece here down here is also isolated.
Okay.
Haven't moved much. The bottom one's moved just a tiny bit. Not going to affect function. Next thing you see there is extremely common in this age of a sewer with this kind of an access. No drain cleaner was going to show up at this house and want to come up here and put a cable through this. They also weren't going to go up on that right there and do it. So what they do is dig it up out in the yard, smack a hole in the top of the pipe, and then clean it from there. Then they patch it. That's what that is. You see that hole?
Okay.
So
it has been cleaned up.
Yeah, this was probably done in the 40s or 50s, maybe the. But it's extremely common to see that, and I've seen some of these 110-year-old ones that have 5 of these in it, where it's been dug up 5 different times in 5 different places by 5 different guys. Now, it's a 3x4 hole, and there's no dirt coming in it, so we can be very confident that it's patched. Patches can eventually fail, but I've seen patches that had to have been there for 70 years that are still doing their job. As long as we don't see soil and roots coming in it, and we don't see a bunch of spider web cracks coming around it from where it was just, they weren't as gentle with it as they should have been, it's extremely common, and we don't get too worried about it. There's another one right there. That one's an even cleaner patch. So it is very common to see those in these sewers when you know the access was not great. So far the rest of it past that point is looking pretty darn good. That was probably your original kitchen line. Can you go down and turn on the kitchen and just turn the cold on? We're going to wait for her for a second, and we're going to see where our water comes from. I didn't look when I was down there to see if it's been bypassed. These old houses tend to have a grease trap for the kitchen line. so the kitchen came out on its own separate branch.
Okay.
Went to a grease trap, then wrapped its way back around to the main. If it's been bypassed, 90% of them have by now, but there are still some that haven't. If you buy a house that is of that age, you can be aware that it might be your job to do. Because the problem with them is you have a very small access to get into it in the first place. So I can't even get a camera in the line, because even though that's 4-inch, it's 1.5-inch line to get out. And sometimes it's old lead and it's even smaller than that. And then there's the other side of the grease trap. The grease trap's just a big tank. I don't know if you're not familiar with it.
No.
It's a big holding tank. The water comes in, food settles to the bottom, grease floats to the top, and then gray water exits. You can turn that off. It doesn't even have to get to me. I can hear it drain it. There it is.
Really? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so it's been bypassed, so we won't even have to worry about it. But it leaves us a whole section of stuff that we're blind to, and that can still have problems and can cause a failure, but we can't check it out. Especially the section from the grease trap to here. There's no access for that, because that lid is buried and hasn't been seen in 40 years.
Okay, so.
But I could hear it trickling in here from the start. They've rerouted it, and it comes into the main, so it's not even an issue.
Okay, good.
That's your first roots that we've seen. Clay tile pipes leak. 110-year-old clay tile pipes definitely leak. That's a very clean union. There's nothing broken about it. Don't ever let someone tell you it's broke, but it leaks a little, and that attracts roots. Part of owning a house this age is occasionally cleaning it. This doesn't have great access for cleaning it. If you're going to live here for 20 years, you might put on your agenda somewhere down the line to find it and add a clean out outside, so that it could be cleaned without them coming up here or crawling in the crawl space or something like that. For as hard a cleaning as this would be, it's remarkably clear right now. That root is a long way from being one that's going to cause you problems. This one's not as clumpy, but long and growing horizontally in here. See, it's accumulating a little grease. All that looks kind of apocalyptic, but that's actually still pretty minor roots right there. They're not really thick enough to catch anything. That stretch there does mean you've got a cleaning coming up, though. Probably within the next year you'd want to clean it, just so you know you've done it. The one thing we don't know is when is the last time they've cleaned it. This is a viable access for that, because it's copper and cast, and because it does sweep in so nicely, you could get into it from here. The only thing you never like is the fact that you're cleaning a 4-inch line through a 3-inch access, so you got to put a smaller blade in so you're not as effective. And if you wrap a bunch of them up and then you come back from the 4, you've got to get those roots up through the 3. And sometimes you can wrap up a 4-inch ball, and that makes for fun. Mostly, other than that initial stuff, this is a pretty darn nice old sewer, knock on wood. Keep our fingers crossed. But this out here has been fairly low in roots, and there's not a whole lot going on as far as any kind of damage goes. Haven't really seen a couple little. No, I don't think they're even hairline cracks. Sometimes you'll see that ridge on the left here, the inner one.
Yep.
Sometimes that's a little stress crack that happens in a ton of joints, and it's not affecting anything. In this case, I think it's actually the way this clay was fired, because I've seen it on about 5 unions, and I don't think they're cracks at all. Even if they were, they're not the kind of cracks that bug me at all. They're a little stressed, they don't move, they've been that way for 90 years, it's just nothing to worry about. And anyone that, once again, tells you it is a fibber. This is a bit of an offset. We're going to talk about it just so you know if anyone comes along and tries to exaggerate it. Anytime you see that flat edge, it's not perfectly aligned.
Yep.
We call this one deflection. What's happened is they're turning down, but they didn't use a 22 or a 45 piece. They just tilted the pipe down. And the bell hub's still about this wide, and it's still up inside of it, but what happens is the bottom of it will butt up into the fitting before the top can close all the way, because they've tilted it down. And that exposes the whole top half of the downstream pipe. it's totally functional and it's not a problem. If anyone tells you it is, they're fibbing. This one looks a little squirrely too. What this actually is our 4-inch pipe. We're out by the alley and our 4-inch pipe is now going into a 6-inch pipe. So sometimes it doesn't look very clean because they're pretty rough with this. I've seen where they've just taken the bell hub and smashed it off with a hammer, leaving jagged, nasty edges. Then they just slide it a foot up into the 6-inch pipe. So you come on it and you're like, whoa, that's broke. No, it's not. It's just stuck up in there and it still functions. But that's what that is. That's a transition from 4-inch to 6-inch, and it means we're out here by the alley.
So this is going backwards?
Yeah.
Not off the street, back to the alley?
Yeah.
So we're running under the garage, right?
We'll take a look. How is the garage contemporary to the house? But it was built at the same time the house was?
Well, it was built
Tough
the
to
same
tell.
time.
I mean, it's definitely old, but
Well, we'll take a look. This one's an offset. This is the first kind of negative one. Anytime it leaves a lip in the bottom, we're not thrilled with it having a lip. The two good things we have going for it is the 6-inch pipe. We're going down a pretty steep incline prior to it. So anything that might get caught there temporarily will tend to get washed right off of there by the next heavy flow because the pipe is so steep there. And the other good thing is you see that puddle of water just sitting there and it's not draining out. That tells us that the union's not losing a lot of water, which means it's not a real unstable union that we expect to see a lot of movement from. If that water just drained right out of there and was dry and we could see into it, then we'd be a little more worried about it. It might be a bit of a bump for us at this angle though. Yeah, I was afraid of that. Because we're pointed down too, and our camera wants to stay down.
damn gravity.
It's gonna smack us right into that lip. Which is annoying because that means we're gonna have to bring it all the way back out. And try to take steps to get over that because we want to see the tap. The tap's right around the corner from us, but we want to see it. So I'm going to have to pause here. I'm going to bring it all the way back. Alright, so we did get over that hump. There's our city sewer. There's not a whole lot of action going on in that city sewer. We must be near the top of a line. You can see our tap is intact, but it does have some very visually obvious cracking there. From the left and the right. The pieces have not sunk or moved much. We saw water flow just fine over it, but it is another blatantly obvious crack like the one at the beginning. We will back up and look at the section before that offset, which is right there. And we think everything in this line is pretty darn functional. The roots are not ready to be cleaned just yet, but we do have two areas with some obvious cracking. So we will stop right there.